So you probably noticed there's a lot going on when it comes to the ET and disclosure subject, mainly, which is what we're going to talk about today, why it seems that humanity is so, captivated by the ET subject, the phenomenon, the search for life outside of our planet. So we see this in a number of different ways. You have a huge increase in the amount of ET-related films that are happening, per se, in mainstream, entertainment and so forth. You have the news starting to talk a little bit about the ET and the UFO phenomenon and kind of disclosing that to the public. Now, sure, there is a whole narrative going on there that may or may not be controlled in certain regards, but that's not really the subject of this conversation. What really is going on here is one of the biggest searches across all of Google, which is about ETs, about ET life, and about aliens in general, right, seems to be captivating humanity in such a massive way right now. Even with films like Unacknowledged, which came out just last year, was such a huge success, not only on iTunes, but on Netflix. This is a film that explores the ET reality in detail. Why is it that we're so captivated by this subject now more than ever before? Now, there's a couple of obvious things we can talk about, like, for example, it's becoming a little bit more obvious. There's more sightings, there's more access through the internet for people to talk about things. And of course, with the information becoming more and more widespread, the conversations are happening a lot easier, and therefore people are becoming more open to the subject. However, there's still, beyond that, it seems to be, and we see this all the time in people that we talk to, there's a huge level of interest in this subject. People want to know everything about it. And the reason for that is something we're going to talk about today, which is almost like an underlying deep desire to connect with beings other than humans. Now, I know that sounds a little bit like, whoa, what do you mean there's an underlying deep desire to connect with something other than humans? I'm going to explain why this is at the core of what's going on and why this is such an important thing to observe, because it actually means a lot given where we're at in human history. So the first thing we're going to look at in why this ET phenomenon is captivating the entire planet right now is we're going to talk about how does life on Earth feel right now? When you really reflect, and I want you to put yourself in daily life, in looking at the stuff that's going on in media, in looking at the stuff that happens in your own, say, career, the relationships you have around you, the connection you have to yourself, and all of these sorts of things. Really think about it. What do you see on the faces of people when you're walking down the street and they're going just about their day kind of just on their phone or looking down or whatever they may be, or when they're on the subway and they're kind of just, seeming like, hey, it almost feels tired. It almost feels like things feel outdated. It feels stale. It feels old. Everything we've been doing for such a long time. Now, yes, there are new technologies, little things that come out that kind of lighten up the experience a little bit. But when you really break down what humanity is doing as a society across the planet, it feels just kind of blah, if you want to call it that. Now, this isn't to say there are not beautiful things happening, but I really want you to search within yourself and ask yourself the question, are you really enjoying, deep down, this idea of needing to be governed by specific people that do not have our interests at heart? Are you really enjoying having to make money all the time to exchange things that are low quality crap anyway that break in a couple of years? Are we enjoying the way we've set up our society, which comes with a ton of limitation, a ton of obstacles, that really just we know deep down we can do better? And so when we think about what we're doing on our planet right now, and we understand that from an evolutionary, so a consciousness evolutionary perspective, it simply feels old and outdated, and we're ready for something new. We're not talking about, an industrial revolution type thing where suddenly a lot of things change within, the way careers work and this, and we get some new technologies and so forth. We're looking for, deep down, an entirely, new or expanded experience to the human experience that kind of takes this one and says, whoa, what we've been doing here, we're ready to move beyond that. And what we're about to move to and what we're continually going to transition and bridge to, we're not even going to recognize the world that we have today once we get there. So are you feeling this feeling of, hey, you know what? Things are just a little bit outdated? Because that is a feeling on the faces of so many people. We've been observing this for 10 years, and we've been talking to people about this for 10 years, and it just seems to be the case. We're fighting to hold up a world that just doesn't feel like it makes much sense anymore. And instead of letting it go, we're resisting it. Now, how does this relate to ET life? We're going to get to that in 1 second. So one of the biggest secrets, right, of what goes on in this whole disclosure movement and what goes on in why they have not disclosed ET reality to the public. Most people will say it's energy. It comes down to energy. People start to know that there's different energy propulsion systems available, that these energy systems either link with consciousness or link with other forms of non-fossil fuel based energy that in most cases are endless or infinite. That is the main reason why. And sure, that's a big reason, right? You start to, show people what's possible from a technological standpoint based on what's been revealed in a lot of, disclosure type topics that we can talk about. You start to see that, hey, it's pretty threatening to our system. However, that's not the biggest secret. The biggest secret is consciousness. This is why, this whole subject is such a massive secret. And we're going to get into that and what that means. So first I'm going to start with an example. And the example I'm going to give is this. Imagine for a second that you have, Earth. And for lack of a better way of drawing this, we're just going to do it this way. I'm sure there's going to be a shit ton of flat Earth people losing their mind right now, but we're just going to draw it this way for the sake of drawing it. This has nothing to do with flat or round Earth. We're just drawing it in this way. So let's say you have, group 1 over here of people on one side of the world and group 2 over here on one side of the world. And these people have their own, say, cultures and traditions and ways of doing things and technologies and so forth and la-da-da-da over here. They don't even know that these people exist, and vice versa. They have their own cultures, traditions, and la-da-da-da-da-da, right? That's what those scribbles are. So what happens when all of a sudden, and this happened in humanity's history, these people decided to get on a boat and they went across and eventually met these people over here, and they went, oh wow, there's people over here. And in some cases, there was a lot of war, there was a lot of fighting. But beyond that discussion, there was also a lot of new understandings of how people over here did things completely different than how people over here did things. Languages, cultures, traditions, technologies, understandings about life and what we know, right? You have people here that were in touch with ancient civilizations and others that weren't. The knowledge gap was huge in some cases. And as people brought that together, as a humanity, as a whole, it expanded our knowledge. Thus, it also expanded our consciousness of what we thought was possible at the time. So instead of just living this limited, stale, outdated version of life, we got on a boat and understood that, hey, there's a whole other set of people over here and they're doing something that's entirely different. We expanded our consciousness in the process, and all of a sudden life started to expand very quickly after that in a lot of different ways because we brought in new understandings. This process is exactly the same thing that is taking place with humans' interest in wanting to connect with extraterrestrial beings, because our consciousness, the deeper aspect of ourselves, knows that this world, what we've been living in, what we've been doing, feels and is outdated. And it is just something we're ready to move beyond. All this fighting and suffering and limitation and the cabal and all these different things that are going on is outdated, right? You know that. You can feel that within yourself. There's no argument that needs to take place here. We know that, right? So what happens is if we begin to explore and search and connect with beings that are not just going to come in with a different human perspective. Because we got to ask ourselves the question, what does it even mean to be human, right? We get so caught up in, oh, we just got to be human. It's all about being human. What is a human? What does that mean? How is a human's consciousness defined? What does it mean to be human? A question that you cannot answer, right? And we try and throw cliche statements on, oh, it means love, Sure, that sounds nice and that's great and everything, but what does it actually mean to be human? We're talking about limitations. We're talking about belief systems. We're talking about potential, right? What are humans really capable of? To move beyond this outdated old system, what are we really capable of? Let's not dream up, a small change in our system that says, oh, now we'll make it so that when we vote, it's slightly different, yay. No, let's dream up a system that we know we can truly thrive in, and we can grow and truly be something incredible here. Right? And this is why the biggest secret in extraterrestrial disclosure is consciousness, because the value of humans coming into contact on a mass level with civilizations that live completely different, with an entirely, and again, it's not about levels here, right? But with an entirely different scope. This is one and this is two, and these are completely different ways of being. All of a sudden you bring these together and we're trading ideas and experiences and understandings. No longer are we saying this is what it means to be human and this limited view of what life is, which is what the cabal works so hard to limit us to do. So the biggest conspiracy is consciousness, because when we begin to understand, hold on a second, there's a whole other way of living out here. There's a whole other set of technology. There's a whole other set of a way of looking at what it means to be alive, what it means to be a being, looking beyond certain religious texts and ancient knowledges that have been controlled and confined. And now all of a sudden we have an entirely new understanding of what's possible. What do you mean we don't need to exchange money to all live? What do you mean, we could actually do and provide our gifts to society, each and every one of us, versus just kind of suffering through a job, just to keep ourselves alive? What do you mean we don't have to be in survival mode constantly? What do you mean our science is outdated? What do you mean that we've had this very limited scope and view of what it means to actually live? That's what comes from this, from actually starting to question and starting to interact with ET beings, right? And it sounds crazy because we're like, oh my God, there's no such thing as ETs. Yeah, because that's part of the conspiracy, to maintain this idea that there is nothing else out there. So we keep doing this over and over again because it's of the interest of the people that have been maintaining control and power for so long. Don't let people expand their consciousness. The disclosure ultimately is a disclosure of consciousness more than anything else. It's a disclosure of a massive increase and upgrade in the way humanity understands itself from a consciousness perspective. So, what can we do? Knowing this, what can we do? The reality of the situation is we need to continue to ask questions and explore and really test ourselves. Why do we limit what we think is possible? Where in our daily life, where in our daily understanding of reality do we get caught up in limitations of what we think humanity is truly capable of? How much of those limitations are, something where it's like, yeah, I understand that, for example, we're not just going to jump off a bridge and just be able to fly, right here, then and now. Versus more so, that's an extreme case of what we're talking about. When we're talking about limitations, we're talking about really even something as simple as, why do we feel like we're limited to having to wake up, go to school when you're young, and then, nobody really enjoys that process all that much, and then just get a job and then just kind of, continue through this society. Why do we think that we have to have money to exchange things? Why do we think that humans always have to fight? Why do we think that we have to be in these tribes of small individualized people that need to war against one another? Why is that what we think humans are? And if you look at the collective consciousness video that we just did the other day, the more we believe this kind of stuff, the more it is popped into collective consciousness, the big bubble that we all tap into, and the more that this stuff actually happens in our world. So what you can do is change yourself within, question your limitations, have conversations with people about really expanding and exploring what we're capable of and what our reality is, what we could actually have it be. Right? And if you really want to dive into that subject, go back and search for our collective consciousness video, because that's really what's going to dive more deeply into this. But to sum all this up, essentially, one of the biggest secrets of why ET disclosure is so intense is because there is a huge goal in suppressing the expansion of consciousness that would come from such a disclosure. Yes, there's a lot of technological stuff too, but that is the biggest part, because it collapses all of how our world functions, because our consciousness creates our reality. So that's the biggest thing. And on top of that, really look within yourself and feel, how does the world feel today? How does it actually feel? Do we want to fight so hard to keep a system in a world going now that we know doesn't even work for us? Or do we want to start getting together outside of government, getting together and saying, how could we rebuild this game and do it differently, and do it from an expanded state of consciousness? That's what this is about. And that's why I think that, this whole reality of people, how much things expand when you go across the water and you find a whole nother subset of people, and whoa, that's what this search for ET phenomenon is about. Because deep down, we know that we're looking for something more. And this is one of the best and biggest ways that it's going to happen.